G'day everyone, it's James Davis from the Pax8 Academy again, and this time I've got George from bvoip. How you doing, mate?
Doing well, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. I hear a bit of an accent. Where are you located in this wide world?
Well, for I know I think everybody knows where New York is on the map. Not quite in New York. I'm in Philadelphia or suburban Philadelphia for that matter. But I can get I split my airport travel between Philly Airport and Newark, which is right outside of New York City. So northeast of the U.S. here. That's where my mail gets delivered. When I'm not on a plane, that's where I end up.
Oh, it's awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you on because talking about a topic today around modern communications for business technology, and you've been around this for a long time. You may not look it, but you've been a bit of a veteran. So what I want to understand first to just dive in is what are you seeing in general with partners and how much they're embracing that sort of technology to help their clients?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. There's a lot of flavors of the week, I like to call them. Like, hey, I've signed up as a reseller for this company and this company and this company and this company, but like, kind of goes counter to the methodology of IT services and managed services, which is I never standardized on anything. So you got a lot of people in that bubble, right? I call it like the agent bubble. And then you have a lot of people who have, are dabblers, right? I think everybody in technology land loves playing with new toys. I mean, I do. That's why I got into it. Um, but sometimes the new toys, is like, hey, well, I can cobble together something, throw it up on a cloud server somewhere, or maybe host it in my own data center server or whatever. And then they realize that there's a scaling problem at some point, right? So they've created something that works okay if you look at it in a bubble, but as you scale to your customer base or even internally, like you got to keep the lights on, you got to keep these things going, like just like all other technology. So like there's I call it the DIY guys, right? That's bubble two. Bubble three is, hey, I've gone full deep end. I've signed into like a wholesale style relationship. Like I've become my own, shop, right? From a telephony standpoint, from a communication standpoint. And whether they've stood up a second business or they've rolled it up underneath of their technology business, they're actually, they've put some hard dollars and time into it, hoping that it takes off. So that's bubble three. And then bubble four is like, I just don't do anything, right? Like, I recommend it, I refer it. It's not my bag. I'm in the IT realm. Go to somewhere else. Let me know what you find, or don't call me if it's not I'm not gonna fix it, right? If it breaks, call somebody else. And then like they really just don't have a great answer unless they force their hand. So generally speaking, those four categories are the majority of not just your market, right? APAC and Australia, New Zealand, but here in the U.S., it's very similar, and over in Europe, it's very similar. So, like, these percentages slightly shift, but not by much. But if you ever did a survey or looked at a survey, even in the last 3 or 4 years, of like, hey, what are you using? It looks like 100 slices, of the pie, and very, very not standard conversation. Especially even with, the newer players since the pandemic, Teams, Voice, Zoom, Phone, that kind of thing. Um, no standardization, right? Like, is the partner actually managing it? Are they generating revenue off of it? Are they expected to support it, but are they charging for that support? All of these things fall down into this conversation. So, unfortunately, it's a mixed bag. Unlike everything else MSPs adopt, right? Like security, backup, infrastructure, cloud, right? They've standardized across their customer base. Not in this category.
Why do you think that is?
A little bit of just how time has evolved, right? Like the copier guy was a copier guy, the security guy was a security guy, the phone guy was a phone guy, the IT guy was the IT guy, the electrician and the cabling guy was that guy, and like at some point everybody just kind of stayed in their lane, right? Because like that's not wasn't software like it is now. Now it's just another app that overlays on top of what's already there, and so you have to view it differently, right? Like obviously the pandemic forced the agenda. I would say down in Australia, the MBN forced the agenda. So like these are things that are like shifting the tide a little bit. But I think it's, hey, I'm dealing with it. I haven't taken it by the horn and said, hey, we're going to look at this category as a revenue generator. We're going to control our time burn. We're going to make sure that there's revenue there that's worth our time, right? Because that's the problem. A lot of the people historically look at this and say, all right, I've signed up. I'm in bubble one. I signed up as a partner of a bigger company. Let's just use Telstra because they're the big elephant there. And like I signed up as a partner, a business partner for Telstra. Okay, I send opportunities to Telstra. All right, I get this small piece back in return, and like that small piece doesn't even cover my labor rate, right? So the second I recommend something, I'm in it, and the second it comes back on me, I got to deal with it. But like I'm not necessarily charging for the time it takes to deal with it after I've recommended it. And so like when you get a call into your service desk and they're like, hey, you signed us up for this service with, we're going to say Telstra here, and like it's broken. Are you going to say, hey, just call 1-300 Telstra? Like, what do? Do you say, sorry, I can't help you? Of course, the natural inclination is we're going to help them because that's what we do. We're in the helping business. So like, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a square peg, round hole, or I would call it a crap sandwich, right? You get pushed in between two pieces of bread and you're stuck in between, and it's a very uncomfortable situation when you're there. So of course the question is, well, if I get stuck delivering free time and I'm not generating enough revenue to make it worth my while, I'm not dealing with this. Like, why even bother?
It makes sense. I've heard this conversation over and over and over again of just VoIP's not worth our time, because of exactly what you've said. And what I'm hearing just from what you've been talking about so far is there seems to be a lack of understanding about the category to then develop a proper strategy of what they need to do. So maybe we should explore what modern communications actually is. Like, what sort of components are there? We've mentioned VoIP as one sliver, but it's a pretty small sliver of this, isn't it?
Yeah, I say this all the time. Like, making the phone ring, like, people have figured that part out, right? Like, that's not super complex. Think of communications, like I said earlier. It's another app. It's a SaaS app. That's what it is, right? If you look at Microsoft Teams, it's a SaaS app, right? They integrated pieces into it, but generally speaking, it's software. So at the end of the day, if you change your mindset to, hey, this isn't just an appliance now. This isn't just electricity now. This is an app that sits on the endpoint, that sits on the network. It's going to have to play nice with all the other things that we're doing. Then you look at it differently, and you start to see business applications that go way past making the phone ring. Like, yeah, I think everybody's gotten used to the work from anywhere. I mean, I surely lived that life, to be honest. But at the end of the day, like the whole, hey, some days you could work from an office, some days you're working from the beach, some days you're working from home, some days you're working from the your car, whatever. That's real. I think it's more real now since we've gone through what we've done globally in the last few years. But being able to tie into the business applications, being able to get meaningful reporting, business intelligence, tying into the actual things that run these businesses on a day-to-day basis changes the conversation. Now you look at it as more of a, hey, how does this make us more efficient? How does this make us more accountable? How does this actually generate potential cost savings, and or how do we do more with less, right? So you can look at it from both sides of that. And now all of a sudden, yes, that ringing part, that messaging part, that chatting part, that transcription part, that recording part, that like all of these pieces now can tie in to all of the things that you actually need to run whatever the organization is. And so when you zoom back and you look at that hook, right, from all of those angles, now all of a sudden it's a completely different conversation, right? We're saying, hey, we're going to centralize the way for our people to track, collect, and ultimately, report all of these client interactions. There's so many different ways that this stuff comes in. And if you do that correctly and you get it logged correctly and you get it reported correctly, now all of a sudden you have data points that you never had before. You have actual points where you're like, hey, if I can measure it, now I can do something different because I know what my starting point is. I know what my baseline is. So like, you're like, well, George, I thought we were talking about VoIP. Well, this is a completely different conversation. No, like that communication, chat, messaging, voice, video, all the same track now. It just is. And so you can tie in the social media messaging, you can tie in WhatsApp, you can tie in, chat on your website, you can link, integrate into Slack and Teams, you can do all these cool things. And then you can turn around, think of the MSP for a second. Connect your PSA, right? Connect your Autotask, your ConnectWise, your Halo, your Synchro, whatever. connect your documentation tool, connect your PSA or your RMM and your remote access tool. And now all of a sudden, I've supercharged the conversation. I've automated steps, and I've made my people way more efficient because now like it's actually doing things for me in all of my systems as I'm going along, rather than, hey, I gotta stop what I'm doing on the phone, look somebody up, create a note, create a task, create a follow-up, then the call's done, finish my notes, then I have to send it to somebody else. And like by the time I'm done, how many steps did I take? A lot of steps. So like I just give you that example as what the MSP's world is. Now apply that to the MSP's end customer. Same challenges apply. Different tools. Same challenges apply. So if you take that aspect, you zoom out and you say, well, James, yes, I know my customer is paying somebody for this category. Got it. So making money here, at least I know where I'm starting at. Great. VoIP. Got it. But what about the rest, right? That's where the modern communication conversation comes in. And then all of a sudden, you know, and again, you don't have to go full bore into it right away, but you have the ability to expand into what's available today versus what you thought was available 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
It's a huge shift in mindset from our traditional fix things that are broken, or we manage the infrastructure, or even feel like the SIs will dump in a bit of technology and run. It's this ongoing journey of business consulting. This is that us elevating ourselves to being a technology advisor to solve business challenges. Because what I just heard from what you were saying then was all these technology components. Well, depending on your client, they might not all apply, or they might apply differently, and you need to understand how their business actually operates now and what it could operate as well, so then you can design a journey to uplift their modern communications to do what you said around driving efficiency, enabling more revenue generation. Like these are those sort of positive things that, you know, VoIP was a necessary evil in some ways. Everyone needed a phone, but now it's how can you do more with less, like you said, and enable that work from anywhere. So let's talk.
100%, James. Let me say one thing though. It also helps prevent data leakage, right? If you're taking messages on your mobile and your Facebook and your LinkedIn and your chat tool separate over here, your email separate over here, your Teams is over here, and like all of a sudden, this data is on islands, right? And like you're hoping that the human being is just a robot and like they're just so efficient that this always gets where it's supposed to go. The reality is that's not the case, right? So like if you don't have a way to get all of that in the right place and like, you know, keep it organized and integrated and collected, you know, like you're hoping that it gets where it's supposed to go. It just doesn't always get there.
I think that's a perfect example of how to sort of think about this in our how we're evolving our businesses. What you just said there, it's data governance practices. We're all worried about cybersecurity. How is this communications being done securely? How is this then tying into AI technology that's coming, and how are we governing the safe use of that? And then how are we governing and enabling the interactions and integrations between all these systems to make sure they're maintained and improved? It's one of those pillars that we should be looking at in our business. And I think 100%. I think a lot of people here, like, you know, that everyone's techie, right? So they're probably hearing this and going, I know I've got to start asking more questions around my clients' businesses and getting to understand, but most people need to understand a bit more about the technology. So we spoke about cloud VoIP, you know, probably even 4 or 5 years ago, most people didn't really know cloud VoIP was a thing, but we're here now. You mentioned some other technology there, like what in this space should people be thinking about in terms of the technology side for the functions that are possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think what people don't realize, James, is that there's a lot of microservices happening across all these different SaaS platforms. So to your point, you brought up AI. I know it's kind of a marketing thing right now. It's like the next thing, right? First we were in cloud, then we went into cybersecurity. Now we're in AI. Okay, well, no, all good. But imagine taking all of these pieces, right? Your messaging, your call recordings, your call logs, your all of that metadata, right? And you're now feeding it into something like Azure Cognitive Services. And probably people don't even realize that that's a thing. It exists. It's the foundation of what is now going to grow into some of the AI features that you're now seeing in things like Copilot, which is really brand new, right? So imagine I could feed that data into what I call microservice, right? Like you're taking that data, you're feeding it into the big guy's machine, and now they're trying to do pattern recognition, sentiment analysis, trend, tracking, and they'll do the transcription as well as part of that, right? And then like now all of a sudden you're getting the machine learning part, the AI part of this, right, to apply towards information that you didn't even think about, right? That's where the microservice tied into the platform makes a big difference. Let me flip it around in even another way. How about just taking different use case applications and feeding it into the conversation? James, we had the MGM Casino Hotel hack a couple months ago. I don't know if I categorize it as a hack. It was a $100 million hit to the organization. I got it. But they just bamboozled the person on the help desk who took the call, right? They went to LinkedIn. They found out that James Davis works for, MGM's Casino Hotels. They called in. They said, my name's James Davis, and they got a password reset. That's just table stakes, right? I didn't have to, embed malware or something, right? So once they were in, they were in. And then, they had access to that person's, rights, roles, permissions. Like, it wasn't exactly a hack, right? So how about just simple user verification as a microservice, right? Hey, I have your information from our CRM system. I see, I'm going to send you a random code to your information on file. I have your cell phone. I have your email, whatever. I'm going to send that in. Please, just send that back to me. I want to validate you. Or, hey, how about I already have their information in the system. When they call in, I'm asking them questions through the auto attendant process, the call flow. And maybe even assign them a PIN code like you would your ATM card. And they have to actually pass that before they can get to a human being, right, to validate them. And you get this with the credit card companies and everybody else, right? So, that's a microservice. And you're like, it's a security conversation, guys. Like, I thought we were talking about communications. This is modern communications. We're feeding multiple pieces of data from multiple tools integrated into the platform in order for you to now add layers of defense. I don't know if I would have talked about VoIP and security. I mean, other than, hey, somebody that's put their password as 1234. I don't care what technology it is. That's too easy to guess, and you probably shouldn't have done that. But this is a net new answer, right? That didn't exist before, that you would have had to ultimately either build or find in a separate tool, and now you have another islanded system. It just changes the conversation. So there's just so many examples of this. Let me throw another one at you. There's a lot of tools out there like PagerDuty, right? Or escalation tools, alerting tools, right? And you're like, what does this have to do with VoIP? Well, hold on. Whether it's an alert from an existing tool, what if it's Microsoft letting you know that somebody's forwarded their email? What if it's your RMM system saying a server's unreachable? Whatever it is, right? Could be multiple different tools, right? Sometimes you would categorize those as critical, right? Hey, somebody should take a look at this right away. We shouldn't sleep on it. So how do you notify those people, right? I'm going to text you. I'm going to call you. I'm going to email you. But I need somebody to acknowledge. And being able to escalate that to the next person, the next person, the next person in an answering service style fashion, because it's so important that we can't wait until tomorrow. We've got to take a look at this now. Same could be said for the messages being left by the customers. Not every MSP, for example, does the 24/7. Sometimes they go, hey, these are our normal hours. If you want to leave a message in emergency, we'll get back to you possibly. Or maybe they do send it to an answering service, whatever. But when you don't have that resources in place, what do? Pass the cell phone around? I don't know. So, how about the same escalation path, right? For somebody calling in, they acknowledge that they leave a message, this is emergency, right? I'm going to be charged for this maybe. And then that goes to that escalation path that's already pre-scheduled, automated, and you're waiting for somebody to interact from your team. That's a microservice on top of a platform that does messaging and communications, right? So this has really matured and gotten so advanced that you're now taking business use cases and you're actually solving them. But by the way, the phone still needs to ring, right? We got that? That's happening. But now we're actually solving other business challenges.
And those examples, I'm sure you could spend hours just going through all these micro examples, but just the ones that you showed us with from an MSP perspective, my brain was going straight to examples for clients, like what you just said with the on-call and escalation system. It's a whole bunch of construction companies that work 24/7 now that need this kind of thing. That what you mentioned around there with the end user verification. It's not just for our help desks. Things like medical centers and accountants and stuff that have PII information need to start doing this. And like you said, the big companies do this because they've had the big systems to be able to do it, and we couldn't bring this technology to SMB. But this is the sort of stuff that we can bring productivity tools to enable our clients that will generate the money, create efficiency, but have security weaved in the story, rather than trying to go security first and trying to flog a dead horse that people just won't buy into it because it's not tangible. Well, we just give them technology that's secure by default. It's a completely different story.
You're 100% right. And this is the challenge with all technology, right? Like, as a technology provider, the evaluation process that you have to go through when you're adopting any net new technology now, has to have some, I just think, common sense, right? I'm sure there's frameworks, right? Everybody has them, and we can talk for eternity about all the different ones. But like some basic checkboxes could be solved with not a lot of effort if you just ask the right questions in the beginning, right? And like you made sure, hey, if I'm required to be held to this, then at some point my customer's probably going to have to held to this standard too. Let's just double check and make sure that we're doing things the first time instead of having to do double work after the time. And so, I mean, that's maybe I don't want to go too far into another direction, James, but like companies that built their solution with the MSP IT service provider focus in mind, they're building it that way by default, right? But when you try and take technology from enterprise or, just general business, and you try and, kind of twiddle it down into this, I call it sandbox, right? MSP land. Sometimes it looks good, it sounds good, the name's good, you feel good about it, but it was built for really another category, another vertical, another size organization. And so unfortunately, you'll find later on down the line that it wasn't the right fit because it wasn't designed properly from the partner's perspective. And I think that's where, sometimes you get some discombobulation.
I agree. It's that, I guess what we're seeing these days is a lot more of that enterprise technology shifting down into the SMB space. And probably the majority of owners out there are still viewing things from the past perspective. Technology has shifted, client needs have shifted, their expectations have shifted, but we haven't changed our mindset. And hopefully through this conversation so far, people are getting light bulb moments going, oh, I need to do this a bit differently. What if we're starting to go buy into it? Yep, I want to dive into modern communications. I see the point. How do we develop a strategy around this? How are we going to make money off this?
Well, number one, like anything else, data is important. If you don't know what you're working with, you're kind of going into it blind. And no offense, I remember when I started MSP back in the day, I was absolutely blind. I just was, I think the wind's blowing that way today. You just got to have to figure it out as you go along. That's the muscle and feel part of this. And I know everybody's been through that phase, or maybe you're going through it now. I'm not blaming you for that, right? Understand that at some point you just need to pay the bills. Got it. But once you do an analysis of what your customers are using, that's the first step, right? Like, hey, do an internal analysis. What are we using inside the organization? Then turn around and even if it's just asking the question, you're not in a position to even offer or sell anything, go to your customers who you probably are already communicating with for everything that you're offering today and doing today, and just say, hey, listen, I'm just curious. What are you doing for mobile? What are you doing for messaging? What are you doing for telephony, VoIP? If you don't mind, I would just want to collect that information on file so that we have it. If you have any bill copies and account numbers, I just want to put it on our system in case we ever have to be involved. I don't think your customer is going to push back on that information and request, right? It makes sense. If you haven't already done it, definitely do it. And then you can sit back and say, hey, across all of the customers that I'm supporting, what am I working with? Are there contract terms? Do I have a cluster of customers with any one technology vendor or not? And then you begin to zoom back and say, what's my Microsoft investment with these people? Do they already have licensing that, can maybe change the conversation here because we're already offering them 365 in one shape or form? Or if it's Zoom or whatever, Google. And then, once you've collected all that information, then you can step back and say, all right, now I know what my customers are paying, what my customers are using, what age of the technology it is, right? Because it could be something that hasn't been looked at for ages. And now I can begin to create a strategy as an IT service provider and say, you know what? I want to go back to my ticketing system. I want to find out all of the tickets over the last 1, 2, 3 years where we had to provide support on those vendors where we haven't even been charging for it. Now you have two sets of data. Time data, which has a dollar amount associated with it. Everybody has a labor cost. Customer vendor data and customer price point data. Between those three pieces, I have more information now than I did when we started this conversation 2 minutes ago. And I can then sit back and start to understand, all right, if we're going to do this, we need to, number one, understand what our costs are, understand what our time investment is in terms of labor rate and investment, but then also make sure that I have enough of a flexible technology understanding and ultimately the tools that I'm trying to acquire here have enough of a spectrum where you can solve for a little customer, a medium customer, a big enterprise customer, because if you end up with too many tools in one category, you've just created your own problem again, right? You're not going to go and deploy the same EDR, multiple EDR solutions across your customers. You're going to standardize on one. Same would go for any of these other categories. That applies here. So one of two things is going to happen. You're going to go out, you're going to have a criteria list, and you're going to solve a solution that you're going to adopt internally and offer to your customers. Or you should go back to your customers and say, keep doing what you're doing, but I now am going to add a little bit of time and money investment into the agreement to cover vendor management, because if we're going to, and you're going to have that data already, right? Hey, we had 10 tickets over the last 12 months where we had to call Telstra for you to solve your issue with this particular service. And when we wrote this up for you, yeah, we knew the internet needed to work, but this is a kind of something that was, not covered, right? And so have the data to go back and confidently have that conversation.
I love that as a starting point, and the fact that you pointed out we already have this data. We've been doing this for years. We've been supporting this technology whether we wanted to or not. We've had to be involved. And what you said there around actually being more deliberate about gathering the information from the clients around who they're engaged with, what they're using. The clients won't push back. They already think that you know it all anyway, and you're managing it. That's their general thought process. So we're starting from, we actually own the technology. We all joke about if it's plugged into the power in the wall, well, we own it, don't we? So this is that elevating ourselves up and just taking ownership in a proper way that we can monetize. And as you were talking, I was thinking one of the big things around this technology is maybe we do decide to change it and there's better solutions for our clients. It's that enablement piece. We're talking about business technology. This is stuff that the end users use all day, every day. So if they've got I'm just using the phone, if they've only been used to the phone, but we've worked out a strategy with our clients to add messaging into it and these escalation software, it's going to change. So how do we monetize and how do we develop a strategy that's going to help transform that business and the way they use their technology?
You said it earlier. I'm going to double down on it. We should be past plumbing, right? Making sure that the network's working and the internet's running and the computer turns on. That's plumbing, right? The water has to flow. I got it. We should be very far down business consulting, right? A little bit of strategy, right? And a little bit of, hey, let me bring something net new to the conversation with the customer that shows them that you understand that, the business part of it is probably as important or maybe even a little bit more important than making sure that the computer is working. We understand the computer needs to work, but what about the rest, the strategy behind the business? So it's just like we said with VoIP, right? Hey, the phone's gonna ring. I promise you that part's easy. Okay? It's pushed forward into a different category now, multiple categories actually, where now the conversation is, can we consolidate the way that people are interacting, right? And capture that information and now make that useful. And the second you understand the software mindset, the SaaS mindset of this, it's going to change your position on it, to be honest. And ultimately, it gives you a leg up with your customer because I promise you, all the MBN advertising they're getting, all the big tech, internet provider, telephony providers are getting, they're not talking about this stuff. They're really not, right? Like they're just, hey, I am a commodity. I'm selling in volume. Let me give you a deal and sign you to a long-term contract. This is not the conversation that's happening. And so when you come in and have that conversation, they're going to be surprised, to be honest. They're be like, nobody's ever asked me these questions before. What are we talking about? And that's going to open up a whole different dialogue.
Well, I know a lot of people will be sitting there and they'll be hearing this and going, yes, 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 but I don't know what to ask my clients. So if you were to dive into, let's just say it's a medical center, what sort of questions would you be asking the business owner to start uncovering this and develop the strategy with the client?
Yeah. How do you make sure that people show up for their appointments? And how are those people scheduling those appointments in the first place? So immediately I have two things. Are you reachable? And are you making it easy for your customer to actually get to you? And two, once it's set that we're going to have an appointment, because that's usually how medical works, did you get there, right? At the time you were supposed to. So appointment setting, appointment reminders, those two things are communication. Messaging comes a part of that. And by the way, still phone. Actually, no joke. I've been trying to book an appointment with so I was getting treatment for something. I was referred to another doctor. I've spent the last 4 weeks trying to book an appointment with this doctor. And like literally calling. Like, oh, go to our portal. Went to the portal, tried to register, couldn't get to a point where I could schedule an appointment. Called back, wait on hold again. And I'm like, why am I struggling to actually get to the point where I can say, hey, I just need to see someone. Can you give me a time? Like, it took me a month. I just got a hold of them today. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. It should be easy. By the way, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that it's the same case in your country as it is in the U.S. And the more people you see, the more money is rolling through the account, right? Like it's a touch point, right? Like you gotta see them in order to charge. If you're making it hard to fill the appointment room, if you're making it hard to fill the exam room, you're already behind. So I actually mentioned it. Finally, when I got to a person, like, what I had to do? I had to press an option that wasn't the I'm a patient or I need to schedule something. I had to be like, I'm a doctor or hospital. Press this button. And I'm like, hey, can somebody help me? Like, because I can't get help anywhere. And then finally I got to a human being. And then finally I got an appointment. And I was like, man, this was hard. This was too hard. So, like, think about, hey, using modern technology. Can I text? Can I get an appointment? Can I chat? Can I get an appointment? Did somebody remind me that there was an appointment? Did it give me an option that if I was not going to be able to make the appointment, I pressed that button or reply back, yes, I want to reschedule, where it automatically gave me more options? Like, this is table stakes stuff now. But by the way, I still sometimes need to get a hold of a human being. And by the way, you shouldn't make your call flow so difficult that I'm literally struggling to get to that human being. I want to get to that person quickly. I think I just saw online, if I'm on hold for more than 3 minutes, 90% of people are going to hang up. Like, this is like, so, sorry, I'm a little bit, salty about this topic. That's real world. I just went through this. So that's what I would say when it comes to medical.
I think right there, just what you explained, it's the holistic thinking here. And if we just, circling back to the VoIP side, the phone will ring, right? Like the phone was ringing. They probably only have one receptionist. They're struggling. There's a way to enable that, and it'll probably make the receptionist more productive in of itself, all of these benefits. But also, just to flip it around, I've seen medical centers with like 5 receptionists because they can't keep up because they're not leveraging technology. And us being able to help them understand what technology is available, it's bad to say it, but like maybe they only need 2 receptionists. So you've saved the money, you've empowered more productivity, better client experience, and you've increased profitability. These are those sort of business consulting level conversations that you can have compared to that plumbing of you need technology for technology's sake. Very different
And
conversation.
and what's coming next, James, is the AI part of it, right? Back to microservices.
Yeah.
Like what will end up happening, I don't know if you saw this not a couple years back, Google invented like a pilot where like you could literally have it call and like set restaurant appointments for you and it sounded like a person called in and like the whole thing. Like that's real and it's about to become in the next 2 years affordable where you could overlay that on top of the communications platform and like begin to take human being time and automate it legitimately and like have that experience not be clunky to the point where somebody's like, I'm not doing this, get me to a human being. That's not far around the corner. And once that happens, to your point, I think it could cut down, I'm sure some people don't want to hear this, but to your point, it could cut down on actual bodies in the chairs.
It's such an important topic. That's why I got you on. It's something that too many people are avoiding, like we've spoken about. That this is a huge opportunity. Like if you just boil it down from a traditional MSP or an SI or a VAR, where our traditional services are commoditizing, the highly competitive, and as you highlighted at the start of this session, there's very few people playing in this space in the SMB space. So
Very few.
blue ocean stuff here and huge stickiness and unique differentiation compared to your competitors down the road. And you can charge high premiums for all of this because it's valuable stuff.
I mean, if anything, for whatever it's worth, there's still if I know what my customer's using and I know what they're paying and I can at least give them the equivalent of the services they're getting and save them money because some people don't look at this stuff for years, 8 years, 10 years. You could use that cost savings, assuming you're not offering them anything new, which I hope this conversation sparks some of that idea, but let's say you offer them nothing new. Take that cost savings and get that existing budget to apply to the other services you're trying to get your customers to adopt. At the very least, that's the wedge to get them to pick up some of those security things that for some reason they don't want to pay for, but they're already, all you're doing is redirecting their funds.
I love that. I love that because it's so true. There is that opportunity to come in, sweep in, be the white knight to go save money, and let's use that elsewhere. I love that concept. Again, I'm excited about this and we could talk about this all day, but we've covered a lot of topics here. What do you want people to take away from this session, and what should they do as their next action step if they've bought into what we're selling here?
Well, takeaway should be just like everything else that you're doing, sometimes things stay the same, but in technology, they change a lot. Do not sit and wait for technology to pass you by and then have to catch up. Try to keep up with technology on all of your categories. I know sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but like that's why a lot of us got into this business, right? We love that part of it, the bleeding edge. This has changed this category's conversation. There's a lot of use cases that you didn't think about. I know we touched on some of them in this call, but the takeaway is there's money to be made here. There's efficiency to be gained here. And this is something that if you haven't looked at it or you haven't looked at it recently, take a second look. Do some homework. You might be surprised what you find.
I love that. And I think what I'd add to that is, we can't be an expert in every domain, but treating this as more of a business consulting function. If you aren't going to deliver this directly, find a partner that actually works at this expert level, not the local telephony guy down the road that just flings commodity services. Because you want to lift your clients, you want to become that technology advisor, lift yourself up and bring that expert partnership in. Don't keep treating this as a commodity.
That's fair. I agree with that 100%.
So it's been awesome, George. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've had fun as well, and I hope everyone that's listening has learnt a lot. And thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, mate.